And we are live. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday, everyone. I am Steve Dotto, and joining me as usual, April is here. How are you doing, April?
I'm good. I'm good. Sorry, I muted because I was typing. I'm good. How are you today? Hey, everybody.
April's a loud typist, and I asked her, I said, when you're typing, can you mute your thing while we're talking? So now she's going to have to turn it on and off. And I've messed with her. I've messed with her system of doing things. Big welcome to everybody here on Webinar Wednesday. We'll let you all get in the room. We've got a huge crowd that signed up again. We got some, I think 13 or 14, about 1,300 people that have signed up for the webinar today. So we're expecting 300 or 400 people in the room today. So we'll give it a second for Webinar Jam to catch up and load everybody in. As usual, folks, we're delivering the webinar today in Webinar Jam. If you take a look on the right-hand side of the screen, many of you have already seen the chat, and you're telling us where you're coming in from. So a great big hello. It's going by so fast, I can't possibly say hi to everybody, but I know it's Frank from Calgary. Hi, Frank, and Jeff from Olympia. And oh, look at Demetrius from Greece. Welcome, Demetrius. Folks, we're starting to get the feel of using Webinar Jam a little bit more on these weekly webinars now that we've used it, the new version for, I think, 4 weeks now. And one thing we've learned is the first 10 minutes of the webinar are when we're going to have any technical issues that you might experience. Occasionally, you're going to have to refresh, and there's a reconnect button now at the very top. If that doesn't work, you can refresh your browser or reload in a different browser. But what happens is Webinar Jam load balances. It looks at how many people it needs to stream to in the webinar, and it spends the first few minutes of the webinar adjusting how much bandwidth it's going to apply to any one webinar. So for us, we've got a fairly high use. We've got 300 people in the room already, so it's going to take it a few seconds to catch up. So I ask you, please be patient. And if it doesn't work for any reason, or you have to run away because life gets in the way and you want to consume this content still, a webinar replay is going to be sent to you a couple of hours after the webinar is done. You'll get a replica replay, which will basically allow you to watch it as if you were here live. And then a few hours after that, I'll be sending out my YouTube replay, which you can fast forward through. It's an awesome way to watch our webinar. You go double speed, and Steve looks like a chipmunk going crazy, but that saves you half an hour of your time. And so if you have to watch the replay, it's available on YouTube. That'll be coming out a little bit later today. And as usual, all of these webinars will be available for 48 hours to the public for free. After that, they're reserved for our patrons at Patreon. They're put into our webinar archives, which brings me to a great big shout out and hello to all of our patrons, all of the supporters of Dottotech. Dottotech is a community-sponsored and supported channel, and our patrons at Patreon are the reason that we are here. So a big hello to all of you, and a big hug from us here at Dottotech. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about online cloud storage. And this is a case where today's webinar topic really came out of the questionnaire that we delivered about 2 months ago. When we went through all of the replies that people were looking for of different types of tutorials and different types of trainings that our community was interested in, online cloud storage, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, all of that was very prevalent in the responses. So we're going to be covering that as best we can today. It is going to be a hybrid webinar, meaning in a few moments from now, I pre-recorded I'm going to play a video, which I pre-recorded yesterday. So it's about 25 minutes. It's actually a bit long this time. But while that webinar is playing, April and I will be in the chat room chatting with you, and we'll come back for Q&A at the very end. You know, it's been a really busy time for us. I've got such brilliant marketing timing. We launched the new version of Evernote Made Easy this week, and actually the first of the new lessons went out on Monday. And of course, it's Canadian Thanksgiving this past weekend and Columbus Day. So I launched our newest flagship product on a long weekend. Brilliant. But poor April had to work yeoman service over the weekend, and I was busy over the whole weekend. But it was a phenomenal launch. We had I think we sold a little bit over 180 units, which for us is a big number. That adds to the some 1,500 people who've already taken Evernote Made Easy. So to all of you who are on board with the new Evernote Made Easy, a big welcome to you all. And some of you, this will be the first Webinar Wednesday because you've kind of come to us through that. It will be just so a big welcome and thanks to April for all the hard work over the weekend. And we're still working. We're still catching up because people are just kind of getting their feet under them in the new course. So it's all good.
We are. Oh, right. You know what? We should say we have some friends from California, and I don't know if you've heard about the fires up in Canada. Absolutely. Like thinking about you guys and hope you're safe.
Yeah, well, you know, the Californian their fire services were a big help to us here in BC, where I live, because we had forest fires over the summer here that were massive, but they weren't in as populated areas as what they're facing in California. We had big fires that went through and it affected, like our vacation property had the fires very close. It was closed down. We weren't allowed near there. We had smoke in Vancouver for 2 weeks. We were living in smoke, but we lost very little property. We had a lot of wilderness damage, but very little property damage. And not that I can't think of any lives, but in California they've already lost lives and a lot of property, and it's tragic. Napa Valley, and so our hearts go out in the latest of the natural disasters, and we don't want to minimize the others in our community who have faced hurricanes and floods and
no, not at all.
Earthquakes. It's been a September that we don't really want to remember, and October's kind of picking up the same way. So
I know.
So yeah. So okay. Well, that's good. Not good, but thank you for bringing that up, April. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive in, and we're going to take a look at my overview on cloud storage systems. And I really struggled coming up with the best way to present this because there's so many tools out there. And if I just went through a listing of all of the different offerings and tools and the different products, I don't think I'd be doing any of us a service. But I did come up with, I think, a really nice theme for how to approach this. And that's basically how to decide what's going to work best for you. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we all want. It's impossible to say which of the cloud services is best, because it's based on how you use it. And just like so many other tools, if you learn to use it properly, if you integrate it in your system, it's going to work very well for you. Almost all of them are going to work really well. So we're going to cover it from the perspective of making a decision and understanding the basic differences, because there are different techniques behind the cloud services. So with that, let me fire up and get the video queued up and ready to go. And April and I will jump into the chat room. We will see you folks on the other side of the video.
Webinar Wednesday takes on the rather sticky issue of cloud storage and online services. And I was reluctant to do today's webinar because there are so many options in that space, and there are so many different, there's just so many different ways that you can approach this situation. And it's so difficult to know exactly which tools are going to work best in each particular case. Kind of looking for the best cloud service tool, it's impossible because it's really so situational. But once I decided to talk about what the best choices for cloud services are for each of us, things got a little bit clear. So that's going to be our goal right now, is we're going to try and give you an idea of which of the main services are going to be best for you. This isn't they are the best and most technically advanced or the most affordable or the most value in a service, but rather the one that's going to fit best in our lives. So we're going to talk about the main differences in the services, and there's a couple of fundamental differences that I think are worth talking about. We're going to discuss their strengths and weaknesses. We're going to talk about a little bit about the costs. It's not a huge amount about the costs because I don't think that's that big a deal, but we will talk about a little bit about security and the privacy aspect of all of the cloud services, how we use it, the different use cases, and maybe we'll open your eyes to a few ways to use online storage and cloud services that you're not using it. And then, of course, we will wrap things up once we get through this pre-recorded part with a good and healthy Q&A. Now, I am only going to focus on 3 services here. I'm going to focus on Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive. But I know Steve is saying, but Steve, what about iCloud, Apple's tool, and Box, and SugarSync, and Sync.com, and CloudUp, and so many more? The reason I'm going to just focus on those 3 is those 3 are the huge ones. The differences that all of these other services have between the 3 biggest are very minute, and they try and find like kind of one angle to deliver something more value. I'm not saying that any of these services are not great, and if you've chosen them and you're using them, you're probably very happy with them, with the exception of iCloud. The reason I'm not showing iCloud is I frickin' hate iCloud. I don't know what it is about Apple, but all of Apple's arrogance came out in 2 apps. All of the negative side of their arrogance. They came out in how they force us to use iTunes and how they force us to use iCloud without explaining how it works and without seeming to give us control over the environment. And it might be better. And it might work really well for you. You might be one of those people who iCloud makes a tremendous amount of sense and it works for. But every time I've used it, I've thought, I absolutely can't stand it. I'm forced to use it in certain instances for certain things in the Mac, But for the most part, iCloud is not my cloud service of choice. So off the soapbox, Steve, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but we're not going to talk about iCloud. All of the other services, even though they're probably very good services, they really are so far behind these three main services that I thought, in order to give value, we're just going to focus on kind of the big, what I consider to be the big three. And when we're talking about your use case, it really does make sense. Now, you can transpose what you know about those other services into what we're talking about, but I'm not going to share a lot of opinion on, whether Box is better than Dropbox. It's, it might well be, but there's just no way to quantify that for me right now. So let's talk about right now the types of cloud services are, because there's two basic philosophies behind how cloud services work. Now, we're talking about online storage systems, right? So systems that are on the internet and that allow us to create an environment where we store files for a variety of different purposes. Now, there's a technique or a system called Cloud First, which is where your content is created and stored in the cloud first, and then you distribute it to your other systems. The examples of that in our case now are Google Drive and OneDrive. And if you think about it, both of those services have productivity apps that are attached. Google Drive has the word processor, spreadsheet, all of that. And of course, OneDrive, Microsoft, has the entire Microsoft Office suite, including Office 365 and all of those tools. And if you think about it from that perspective, is you use the tool to create a document first, then it's stored online, and then it's distributed to whatever devices you're going to want to access it on. That's Cloud First. And then there are synced services. In this case, there's one service, Dropbox, that we're going to be talking about, where files are created and stored on our local computer in our normal fashion. We create them with our word processor, our spreadsheet tool. We create videos. We create our documents on our computer. We store them in a location on our computer, which is then synced. And it is synced to the cloud, and that gives us access to them on a variety of other services, that syncing action. So it's created on our computer and uploaded, as opposed to Cloud First, which documents are primarily created in the cloud and then distributed down. That's the philosophical difference. One's not better than the other. That's just the way that they roll. Now, how do we use these services? What are we, what are we looking for from them? Well, first and foremost is storage, place to store files and store documents, especially the ones that we can access through multiple devices. So I create a new working document or a new blog post that I'm writing collaboratively with Sophia. And the cloud is the perfect place for that because we can both work on it. So storing the document there. Productivity apps. Certainly the Google Drive family of apps and the Microsoft 365 family of apps give us an idea of the different productivity tools that we have, from word processors to spreadsheets to presentation tools, all of that. Backing up our documents, including our photos. Now, originally, we didn't really look at these services too much as a backup services, but they're so ubiquitous and so reliable that they become a really viable place for us to back up a lot of our documents. Now, the difference between a computer backup is we don't back up our applications and our system settings and all of that information there, but we can back up our documents. Now, having said that, several of the services that compete with the iCloud, with Google Drive and Dropbox and OneDrive, several of them provide full backup functionality as a part of their syncing service, where they're actually backing up your applications, and that's one of the services they offer, and it is something that you might consider and look at. I don't worry too much about backing up things like my applications because they can always be reinstalled and downloaded from the web. I'm most worried about backing up my content, and so using the cloud, I get a fairly effective backup strategy automatically just through the multiple nature of where all the documents are stored online and the fact that they're there. Collaborative tools. Of course, that's one of the magic of the online services, the ability to be able to work with your teammates on different documents together in different projects together in a collaborative environment, so everybody has access to this assets that they want when they need it. You know, an engineering firm in a small office space, the engineers and the draftsmen and the designers can all collaborate on the documents by sitting there looking over each shoulder, working on the same document. In today's distributed workplace, we don't have that opportunity. We don't have the opportunity to sit down with somebody, look over their shoulder as they're typing and make edits. Instead, we do it using these collaborative tools online, and all of these systems have to give us some form of collaboration. Of course, file sharing and transfer, sharing documents back and forth with customers, with everything from putting out requests for proposals that people can download to to marketing materials. You can transfer them back and forth. And we use cloud sharing to share all of our videos that we're creating, where I create the video and record it, and then I upload it using the cloud services. And Liz in London downloads that video and she edits it, and then she uploads the result. So we use cloud services to transfer that information back and forth. And there's also a very small case, but it's ever so useful, where we use it for preferences. Like I use a tool called Text Expander, which is a keyboard shortcut tool that allows me to have all sorts of macro keyboard shortcuts where I can type a few letters and it fills out an entire document. Well, I use Dropbox in this particular case to store the preferences for that, so that when I make a change on my computer, on my desktop computer, my notebook computer, as soon as I log in, has the exact same preferences and is able to access the exact same shortcuts. So it's really nice for that way, in that case, for me to have a identical experience regardless of which computer I'm on. So that's how we use it. Now, there might be some other services, there might be some things that I've left out here. I'm sure there are. Looking forward to hearing from you as we go through and get into the Q&A of some of the other ways that you use the services. Now, I'm going to take you through the three applications that we talk about. And I'm just going to show you kind of the surface user interface and talk a little bit about kind of the unique nature of each of the services. And we're going to start with talking about how they sync, because that is the biggest difference. And you've got to wonder, though, you know, when I did this list, you can understand why we've got Google Drive. Google, massive company, huge. OneDrive from Microsoft, massive company, huge. Understandable that those two have dominant market share. But why is Dropbox in this conversation? Why, of all of the different cloud services, did Dropbox bubble up to the surface and become the third player of the kind of the holy trinity of the dominant sharing services? I think opportunity, when Dropbox was first released, was just as we were starting to get into doing this. They did a very good job of marketing, but their founder also put a very important piece of technology in place that actually made for a long time Dropbox, and even today, a technically superior service to the others. Now, you and I would never notice this. We wouldn't think about this. But the way that Dropbox shares files is actually faster than the way that Google Drive and OneDrive and others share files, for the most part. Dropbox does something called block level comparisons or something like this. But effectively what happens is the first time you upload a file in Dropbox, it uploads the whole file, and it's going to take however much time that takes to upload. In the future, every time that it syncs, it only looks for differences and changes at a block level in the file. So it might, if you've just changed one word or two words in a document, it's got a very small amount of data to change. Nobody else really does it quite as well as Dropbox. So consequently, it's much faster and it uses less resources to sync, which is given it a technical advantage that it has to this day. It uses less bandwidth as it's going back and forth. Google Drive and OneDrive, they actually have to have and incorporate a governor, which will allow you to control the speed if it's using too many of your online resources because of large syncing going up and down and back and forth. So that is something to consider as we move ahead. Now, I'm not going to spend time on cost, because we're not speaking of we're not speaking amongst equals. Dropbox is only an online service. It costs about $10 a month for the basic version, which gives a terabyte of storage. Google Drive charges about the same, but it gives you a free suite of tools. OneDrive charges you less, but they ask you to pay more so that you can be part of Office 365, so you get access to paid versions of their Office tools. So really the cost is, all of them are under $10 a month for a massive amount of storage. So really, we're talking about, you know, kind of throwing our hat over it, and just the one is not significantly less money. Cost should not be a factor in your decision-making process, in my mind. So what I'd like to do next is, I think I want to just dive right in. Yeah, I'm going to just dive right in and take you into each of the applications and show you just a little bit about where they live and how they live on our computer. And if you haven't used any of these services before, this will be really eye-opening. And if you've used a few of them, you'll get to see kind of how the other half lives. And I'm just going to talk to you about the kind of the basic things and the basic, what I consider to be the most important functionality here. And then we'll wrap things up by talking about how you make a decision. Because you're not going to, what I show you here, you're not going to see a feature in one that goes, oh, that's it. That's going to make all the difference in the world. That's why I'm buying that one. Unfortunately, file sharing services just aren't that different, and they just don't work quite that way. So let's begin. What I've got is I've got the web version of each loaded here on my computer. And I've got my Google Drive here loaded. I've got my OneDrive, which I don't use very much, frankly. I had to actually install it to prepare for this, but I have it here. And I have my Dropbox loaded here. Now, these are the web-based versions. Now, what happens when you create each of these, when you sign up for each of these services, is you'll download a utility or an app that will run on your computer, and you'll also create a home in your computer for all of your files for them. And how they handle it is it's fairly similar with a couple of minor differences. But for example, with Google Drive, you have to determine what you want to save on your computer, whereas with Dropbox, everything on your computer determines how you're going to save it online. It'll become more clear in a moment. But what happens here is you can see here in my shortcuts, I've just got my Finder open, and Windows users will have a slightly different interface. But I've got a place for Dropbox, I've got a folder for Dropbox, I've got a folder for OneDrive, and I've got a folder for Google Drive here. So this is where I've got all of my synced local documents that are living here, but also live in the cloud in those applications. So this is my physical representation of my shared services on my computer. Here in the browser, we see the online representation of those same services. And with the app, we also see it. And the app typically installs, we see it in our toolbar somewhere. So here's my Dropbox, here is my OneDrive, and here is my Google Drive, all available to us. And having it here in the toolbar or in the menu bar gives us lots of different options for sharing and for doing some other things. But we'll touch on that in just a moment. I want to go back and I want to work from the computer through the app to the cloud as we kind of go through taking a look at the tool. And if we start on the computer, the thing that OneDrive and Google Drive have in common is when you put files in here, they are all synced to the cloud, but it's just a kind of a straight file copy. So for example, if I wanted to take a document, I'm just going to take a picture of me fishing, and I'm going to say, I want to sync that to OneDrive. All I have to do, and there's other ways to do this, but I just have to drag it and drop it. And as soon as I've dropped it here in the folder, that image is then going to be synced through OneDrive. And when we go to our OneDrive in the cloud, we will see there's the picture that's just been synced through. So we see it's been now synced and copied. So there's now a copy of this living in the cloud. It's pretty simple, and it works the exact same with all three of the main applications. What's different is Dropbox has, because it's designed to sync first from your computer, it's got a whole series of additional features that are built in at this level. So if I want to take that same picture, and I don't even have that, I moved it because I copied it over. I'm just going to grab it from here. I'm just going to move back because I don't actually want to lose that picture. I want to keep that picture around for something. But I'm going to take that same picture and I'm just going to option copy it now into my Dropbox folder. See how it's a little plus goes there? Now it's being copied into Dropbox, and you can see a little sync is happening. You can just see it happen there, and actually you'd also see evidence that it was syncing in the menu bar. But now that it's here, if I want to share it, this is one of the biggest differences between all of these different tools. If I want to share it from here, I right-click my mouse, and I've got access to all of these sharing links here. And if I choose to copy the Dropbox link, that's going to just create a URL that's going to copy onto my clipboard that I can then send to somebody else to share it. This, in my mind, is one of the most powerful aspects of Dropbox. It's how convenient it is to share. You can share pretty much identically everything that I'm doing with the other services, but Dropbox makes it really easy and gives you a lot of control over it. I can also choose to share it kind of in an official sharing thing where I put in somebody's email address and I choose whether or not they want to be able to view it, or I can also give them more detailed permission if I go into the desktop, into the web app to do that. So this sharing functionality that we have here, including things like being able to view comments if you've enabled comments on a document, that's something that's kind of unique to Dropbox. If we go in, we take a look at the same stuff happening in OneDrive. When I right-click my mouse on it, you only have the basic Finder level controls over it. And if we go into Google Drive, any of the documents that we have there, we also just have the same basic. We don't have all of those sharing options built here as well. That's kind of one of the unique aspects of Dropbox. Having said that, as soon as we get into the web app, we've got the same level of sharing capabilities with all of these different services. But what we have with OneDrive and with Google Drive is we also have the ability to create a new Microsoft Word document in OneDrive, or a new OneNote notebook, or a new Excel document. We've got the ability to create those Office documents right here, which is something that we don't have in Dropbox. If we're in Google Drive, we have the ability to create a new word processing document, or a new Google spreadsheet, or a new slide, or a new presentation, or a new form that people can fill out information on. We've got access to all of these web apps that are built into Google, which are a very powerful part of how I, for example, run my business. I use these apps all the time. So this is something unique to Google Drive, which I think, Google Drive and OneDrive, which really ups the value of their service. It's beyond just storing and sharing files, but it's the actual creation of the content and the collaborative nature of the content when I'm using Google Drive or when I'm using OneDrive. So that is a big part of that picture. Now, what I wanted to show you though is if I take any of these documents, I'll just go to my recent documents, and I want to share them, and we'll just grab an image, whatever that image was that we just, I think that's just the, oh, that's an image of Shannon, I just, with Farley in the background of the dog. So that's actually being shared, saved in Google Photos. But if I want to share that, now I right-click the mouse in the browser, and there's a variety of ways to do it using the different tools. But now I can open the sharing box, and I've got the ability to set up the same thing where I email somebody and I give them the ability to comment or edit or view the document that we've created. And if I just want the same kind of shortcut as I had in Dropbox, and I just want to create a sharing link, I can get a shareable link that I can choose right now, and I can then copy and paste that into an email or into a text, and I can send it to somebody, and they'll gain access to that document. So we don't have access to these sharing tools at our computer system level, which we did with Dropbox, but we've got access to them as soon as we get to the cloud. And that's a big part of, and that's, I mean, the biggest difference in the sharing setup for both of these tools. And the sharing, or for all of these tools, excuse me. And the sharing is really at the heart. This ability to be able to grab a document, send it to somebody else for a variety of different reasons, and have them get an original copy of the document is tremendously powerful. It allows us, and it sets up the ability for us to collaborate on documents. And when it comes to collaboration, that's where I see Google Drive and OneDrive kind of setting themselves apart from Dropbox. If we're working on a document together, here we're doing, when I'm working with Sophia on any of the different word processing documents for blog posts, or taking this content and turning it into a little mini course in our in our Thinkific account, this is where all of that collaborative writing happens. So being able to collaborate on documents here, very powerful in Google Drive and in OneDrive. The other thing that all of them have that we don't think about a lot is the ability to automatically back up all of our photos from our smartphone, and you can set it up, and they've all got smartphone apps, and you can set it up that as you take photos you get a backup. And I think that's a really smart thing to do, because if you ever lose your phone, you want instant backup of all of the photos happening as quickly as possible. So it's a great way to do it. Google has the additional benefit of attaching to Google Photos and making it work with Google Photos, and allowing you to copy all of your data across into Google Photos immediately, which we've covered in some of our YouTube videos, but it's something that I'm personally a really big fan of. Now, we've looked at the web app for the web interface for Google Drive and for OneDrive. Let's jump over into Dropbox, because it is not quite the same as the others, because it is not a cloud service that has apps. It doesn't have word processor, spreadsheet. It's not where we go to create those sorts of documents. Having said that, it does have a tool called Paper, which is a word processor, which I quite like. It's a really nice collaborative document creation tool that allows you to create word processing documents that you can collaborate with others. And it's got a wonderful collaborative environment. It's not super popular. Not a lot of people are using it. We've got a great video on YouTube where we talk about it, and I do like it a lot. But because it's only writing in Dropbox and it doesn't have all of the other tools, we don't think of Dropbox as a collaborative tool kit right out of the get-go. We look at it for file sharing, for sending documents back and forth. They've added recently some commenting capabilities so that we can comment on graphics and other tools, other images as we're using them. but it still hasn't established itself as a collaborative tool the way that OneDrive and certainly Google Drive do. So this brings us to kind of my summary, which is, if I am thinking about investing my time and money and data in these services, Steve, which one should I use? And that is a really difficult but really easy question. I think you base it on your ecosystem. I think that you don't spend a lot of time worrying, but you go with the flow. If you're a Google app user, if you like using Google Drive, Google Docs, and the writing in Google, and you use Gmail, and you're comfortable with that, Google Drive's a no-brainer. It works. It's integrated with it. I find it a little bit cumbersome sometimes as far as its online interface. But again, you're using it every day. You learn all of those little subtleties, and you get comfortable with it. If you're a Microsoft user and you have an Office 365 subscription, or you are in an environment where that is your tool of choice, and Outlook is where all of your communications happen, and you use Microsoft Office and PowerPoint, use OneDrive. It just makes sense. It just fits. It's going to be the best solution. If you're an iCloud user, if you're a Mac user, you can use iCloud if you want, but I'm a Mac user and I use it as little as possible. But here's the thing. Dropbox actually complements them both. We use Google Drive for all of our collaborative writing, but we don't use it as a file sharing tool. We use Dropbox. Dropbox is a more integrated file sharing tool. It's quicker. It's more efficient for us. So we put all of our shared documents, all of our graphics, all of our video, all of that work goes to Dropbox, as well as things like backing up our mail lists and all of that stuff. So we have a group backup. We do that all in Dropbox. We do all of our collaborative writing and that work. We use Google Drive for that. And we're comfortable with that environment. We're comfortable using both. I don't think you have to choose just one service. I wouldn't choose more than a few services. But I think that because Google Drive and OneDrive are very much based on the apps that you use. If you use those apps, use those services. And then you can make a decision. If you want easier sharing, if you want more intuitive sharing, if you want those features, then you can layer Dropbox on top. But if not, you're probably going to be pretty well set up just with that one service. It's really not that difficult a decision. So let's take this back to the Q&A.
All right, I am back, and wow, the chat was just rocking there. I was just in the middle of making a note to do a webinar on organizing your photos, because everybody's photos are a mess. And as soon as who was it, Mary that mentioned it? Like everybody went, yes, a webinar on organizing my photos. That would be awesome sauce. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that was good. I hope everybody found lots of value in that. We got lots of questions. April's going through and demarking the questions. If I didn't respond in the chat, it's because we marked it as a question, and we'll be answering it here in just a few moments. But before we go on, I want to fill you in on what's coming up and let you know about how it is we are here. So I am going to just, there we go. First of all, as I mentioned right off the top, our patrons make this all possible. So a big thanks to all of our patrons at Patreon for basically supporting Dottotech to the tune that we were able to do these kind of webinars and tutorials every single week. Now, as far as this webinar is concerned here, several people are asking, we don't supply slides from the webinar, but we do make this replay available for 48 hours. Now, you're going to get two replays. There's going to be a replica replay that's going to be sent automatically from Webinar Jam, from the software here. It's going to send you a replica replay. That replay you watch in real time. It basically goes through, and it's just like a complete replica of this webinar. You'll see the chat, you'll see everything. You can even ask questions, and they'll get through to us. So it's as similar to live experience as possible, and it's designed to feel and look like a live webinar. The second is on YouTube. I take the entire webinar, I edit down the beginning so there's not as much preamble. I make it a little bit shorter, and I improve the quality. If there's any issues with the feed, I try and clean it up. And then I upload it to YouTube, and it's available for 48 hours on YouTube. We will also send you out an email with that, as well as any links, any resources from each webinar. And you can watch that, and you can share it with your friends. Please do. It's available for 48 hours, as I said. And a tip, as I mentioned, play it on double speed. It's still, or even if you do it like 1.5 speed, you get through the content much more quickly, and it's still really easy to understand. As fast as I speak, I can apparently speak twice as fast, and people can still understand. After 48 hours, that webinar is going to be archived for the use of our patrons at Patreon. I'm just going to take a few moments now and fill you in on that, because it's become such a big part of why we are here and how we are here. So Dottotech is supported by you folks, the ones that come to these webinars on an ongoing basis, and especially those that choose to support us through Patreon. Patreon's a crowdfunding site, and we ask, if you are interested, if you would consider becoming one of our patrons, we ask for $10 a month from you. And that keeps us on the air and creating this kind of content. And, of course, there are perks that come to you. And let me tell you about them. The first is access to the Webinar Wednesday replays, which are now, this is the 35th webinar we've done. And some of these webinars that we do, we actually turn into mini courses. Sophie and I take the content from each and every webinar. We look at the questions that people ask, and we add additional content into the Patreon archive. And it's all hosted in Thinkific, so it's hosted in a learning management system. So with most of the webinars, there's extra content that we create just for the benefit of our patrons. And some of them turn into like full little mini courses that we've done on, managing your email and in a variety of different topics. Now we charge separately. If people want to purchase just access to the Webinar Wednesday archives, they can do that for $139 a year, but it's a perk that our patrons get. So we've got, as I say, we've got 30, there's well over 30 webinars in there, everything from productivity, like we're talking about now, to social marketing, building your online business, WordPress we've covered how to do online video, how to overcome email overload. We listen to your feedback and we create content that fits, just like today. I mean, I can tell you within the next next month or so, we will be doing a webinar on managing photos, because our community is saying, yeah, that's something that is valuable to us, and we definitely listen there. The other big perks that we include is one that we've really noticed this past weekend is a big discount on all of our courses. So we've got little mini courses that are available. I missed a decimal point. They're not $39,995, although I wish they were. They're $39.95, and our patrons pay $9.95 for them. For the mini courses, our patrons get our premium courses, which are our courses on delivering webinars, on screencasting. Those courses are available at half price at $250. And the Evernote Made Easy course, which we just launched version 3 of, we've had several of you in the group talking about how much you're enjoying taking the course. That's available to our patrons for half price at $74.50, and you get access to those courses, as I say, as a perk of our patronage, and of course our massive appreciation for your support. So it's your support that keeps us going, so thanks to you all. Next week on Webinar Wednesday, it's going to be a special time. We're going to have to go a couple of hours later. Steve has a doctor's appointment in the morning, and it's hard to get them sometimes. So it's going to be 1 p.m. Eastern, Western time. 4 p.m. Eastern is next week's time, so it's going to be a few hours later. And our webinar next week is going to be getting into the social marketing space. We're going to be talking about content marketing. Information's a currency. It's how we make our living here in Dottotech. We're going to be talking about how you can approach content marketing. If you don't really understand what the whole content marketing thing is, I hope that next week we're going to be able to share that with you and get you understanding content marketing. So join us next week. You'll be, of course, invited in several emails over the next little while to join us. And that is that. Let's get a poll. I'm going to get a poll. We haven't done a poll for a while. I want to know what the most important part of online storage is to you. And as you answer the poll, we will dive in and we will get started with some of the questions and answers. But let us know, what's the most important part for you? What's the most important aspect? In April, with that, I think we're ready for questions, are we? You got to turn on your mic.
No, I know you're right. Okay.
There we go.
All right. Let's see. Starting at the bottom here. Do you like the WD My Cloud products?
So there's a variety of different online storage products that allow you to have a local hard drive and to publish your drive to the cloud for yourself. And that's a really good option in a lot of different cases. And the WD series is a nice option in that I don't have a lot of experience in trying out different ones. But if you're going to have a server, basically you're creating a web server yourself at home, it's a nice option. Now, I know somebody asked a question earlier. They're saying they were having a lot of trouble sharing large files and publishing patient files. That was it. that would be an option for somebody like you, where you don't use an online service, which has lots of privacy issues and that sort of stuff, but instead consider publishing them onto your own local drive, like a WD, like the Western Digital, or there's a variety of other tools like that, and then sharing that link from your drive, so it's coming from you directly to your clients to share the files. The person that was commenting was mentioning patients, and they were large files, so that would be a great solution for that sort of situation.
Okay, perfect. Marcella is asking, I'm looking for a possible replacement for Dropbox. I would like desktop access, but without having to sync the 50 gigabytes of files to the desktop. We do not want to use a browser to access files. Any thoughts?
You know, the Dropbox is the leanest as far as transferring data back and forth. And if you have 50 gigabytes of files, even though it looks like a lot, because as I mentioned during the webinar, Dropbox is doing block level changes. So it's not syncing that large a number of files. So technically speaking, you're probably not going to be farther ahead using any of the other services. But you might look at a service like SugarSync or something like that. But I just think that, you know, they all try and give you a browser interface for your main control. I'm just trying to think of something that has a really solid app. And I'm sorry, I am coming up blank. I think you're probably best. I don't think anybody's going to do a better job for you, the Dropbox. Maybe somebody in the community has a better piece of advice as far as this goes, because I'm going to say that I think you're already on the right track. I can't think of a better way to do it than what you're doing right now.
All right. Linda's saying she heard Google Drive's going away at the end of the year. Have you heard that?
No. They're just Google, as is usual Google's cases. They're changing a little bit about how the interface works. They're changing a little bit about how, you know, they're modifying our user experience with it. But none of the services are going to be going away.
All right. Have you used ShareFile from Citrix? I've been using it for a while and like it.
No. Unfortunately, there's, as I mentioned off the top, there's so many services that for me to have tested out all of them is just, well, it won't happen. So I haven't used that one. But if you're happy with it, good. And that's the thing. If this is, you know what, those of you who have listened to us in the past when we've talked about CRMs, I talk about there's no right and there's no wrong decision. There's just your decision. And once you make it, it's up to you to make it the right decision. That's sort of the case with these. You have to have a good quality service. Once you're in kind of the top tier of the top 15 or 20 of these file sharing services, they're all going to be pretty good as far as technical. It's up to you how you set up your own internal productivity systems for managing your content, and how much you learn about using the tool properly. That's going to determine your success with the tool. The biggest difference is when you start incorporating something like OneDrive or Google Drive, where you're integrating their apps with it. You see, it's a very different story when you talk about creating the apps in the service, like with Google Drive, versus just creating the apps on your desktop and looking for a syncing and file backup and sharing solution. I'm just going to, before the next question, I'm just going to end the poll right now, because we've got, it looks like 36% of you consider backup, 35% remote file access, 5% collaboration. That is a much lower number than I would have thought. That one surprises me. Only 5% are concerned with collaborative documents. 15% was sharing files. Again, a lower number. And freeing up computer space, 9%. I think that's as people are starting to get these flash drive, you know, like little MacBooks or you know, the netbooks sort of thing, where they've got flash storage. That's probably a big deal. But look, remote file access, so accessing their documents wherever they are and whenever they are, up 35%, and backing up 36%. That is fascinating. Good stuff. All right.
Okay. Stephanie's saying she has a real problem with, wrong question. I work a lot with Dropbox and I love it and help clients get organized digitally. How can I address the security issue with Dropbox?
Now, who's that from?
That's from Shelley.
Shelley. So Shelley, with all of these services, I mean, you can do encryption at your end, and you can encrypt documents. So taking a little bit of control on that way is would be healthy. All the services support or all of the good services support two-factor authentication on setting up. So make sure you have two-factor or two-step authentication set up for signing into your services. Make sure you're following good password protocols, changing your passwords on a regular basis, etc. Not sharing anything which, if it was compromised, would be devastating. Making sure you find another way for those sorts of files to go back and forth. But again, no security is 100% guaranteed. And then using encryption where you need, whether you're doing it on your own side or whether you're taking advantage of something that the service itself offers. And these different services will offer different levels of encryption, but those would be the kind of the route that I would take to make sure that your content is secure.
All right. Do you have any experience with Amazon Drive?
I've got some experience with Amazon Cloud Services, but I haven't used Amazon Drive itself. No.
Okay. How do I keep Dropbox or G Drive, Google Drive, from filling up in my laptop hard drive? I have TBs of external disk space, but not much on my laptop.
So you can choose what files you want to sync with Google Drive. And with both of them, you choose what files you want to sync and which ones you don't, and which devices you want it to go to. So that's just you getting a little bit more comfortable with your software. But in the preferences, you can choose, and in the file and folder preferences, you can choose what gets synced and what doesn't get synced. So get to know your software a little bit more intimately, and that will solve that problem right away.
All right, Joan's asking, does the paper feature of Dropbox enable you to create content in the cloud?
Yes, Dropbox Paper is a really nice little word processor that's really wonderful for collaborating, and I like using it a lot. We don't use it because the rest of my team is more comfortable in Google Drive, but I think Dropbox Paper is a superb kind of hidden asset that Dropbox has brought to the table.
Are you blaming your team for not conversing to?
No, I'm fine with it.
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Is there an alternative for collaboration using Apple applications like Keynote, Numbers, or Pages?
I'm not too sure. I think that in iCloud you can do some collaborative work, but I gotta admit, I
think it's limited.
I think we're gonna have to ask people out there. We got somebody to let us know if you're doing any collaboration using any of those tools, working on collaborative documents together. I'm not positive how you do it. I mean, you can certainly do it in Dropbox or any of the services by having multiple people accessing the file and having write access to the file, making changes. But marking up and stuff like that, you can use. There's Dropbox markup services, but I'm not too sure if there's any collaborative features built in. I should know that, and I don't.
I know. Well, I know. I think that you use the regular ones, and then we have all these other tools. Michael's asking, does Dropbox search within files? I found that on Google. I found that Google does allow this.
Yeah, Google searches within files. I do not believe Dropbox does.
All right.
Oh, no, sorry. Well, just a minute now. Dropbox will search in files when it's on your desktop because all of the files are hosted in your Dropbox folder, so you're going to be searching within the files if your desktop search supports it.
Yeah, but I thought in Dropbox on the search feature, I could search and find a file.
Yeah, but you're searching. But I think that search is happening. Yeah, you should know this. Again, I think that search is happening at system level, not Dropbox level. Like you go find, you're on your Mac, right? You go find, and it's searching in your Dropbox folder, which is stored locally.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna look. I'm gonna look before we get off because I thought you could search within Dropbox.
Yeah.
I use Hightail for transferring large files. It's just a comment that someone made. Cynthia, I am a new freelancer who's using Google Drive. Previously, the company I worked for had all our files in the cloud, but I didn't have to wait for documents to download. It was the same as opening a doc from my local drive. Will OneDrive create that same experience where I don't have to download my Word and Excel files like I do now?
You can work on them in the cloud. Your internet speed is what's going to determine how quick the experience is.
Okay. Brian is asking, how does Evernote integrate into Dropbox, etc., for document sharing? Currently, I'm sharing a notebook for docs to be processed later. From a file point of view, should I use Dropbox, etc. first, then store in Evernote as a final step rather than the first step?
That's going to, so Evernote is a kind of a wild card in this. It's not really the same as the other players, but it does store all of your content in the cloud and give you access to it from multiple devices. So it's kind of a quasi file storage because you can share directly out of it. You can share links. So it's really going to be depending on your own productivity system, whether you should create the files first and then move them into Evernote for long-term storage, or you want to actually manage them within Evernote. That we can't answer because that's going to be how you set up your own workflow. But Evernote does become a player in this game. It's not designed to store large files. You're not going to store photos and those sorts of images in it. So you're still going to need some sort of a backup service or an online file storage service for those devices, for those things. But for all of your documents, for your PDFs and that, Evernote can work as a cloud storage device as well.
All right. Peggy was kind enough to drop a link in the chat about how to search files in Dropbox.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Can you just review one more time? Are any of these services HIPAA compliant that you're aware of?
I am not sure. That's going to require servers being in the, I think for HIPAA, it's in the United States or in Canada. If you're in Canada, I'm not too sure. So there are, I don't know what the specifics are of each of the services. That's something that you're going to have to look up yourself.
Yeah, I don't think I honestly don't think any of them are. That's why we have clients in the medical field and we use it through our project management system that's HIPAA compliant. So
yeah.
What is the difference in using Google Drive on your desktop versus the cloud?
Well, on your desktop, what's the difference in using Google Drive on your desktop versus the cloud? There's really no difference. I mean, you always access your content, like for word processing that through Chrome or through your browser. So there's just the only difference is really speed. Having a local file versus having an online file.
Right. When using multiple.
Oh, good. Thank you, Leanne. Leanne just posted a link regarding HIPAA compliance in Google Drive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. When using multiple cloud storage, what is your organizational process so that you know what's where? Anything special?
Yeah, what we do is we compartmentalize. I believe it was Morton that was talking about compartmentalizing things by using one service for Dropbox for, I think, personal use of Google Drive for work. All of our content creation, writing is done in Google Drive. All of our graphics exchange going back and forth is in Dropbox. So in all of our video, we use Dropbox. So we compartmentalize it almost by work type. That's how we do it.
Okay. Andy's asking, selective sync in Dropbox, choosing what to duplicate on each device from total Dropbox content seems enormously useful. Do you think there's any downsides to it?
Just staying on top of it and knowing, making sure that you aren't expecting a document to have access to a document somewhere and relying on it and then not having access to it. That would be the only downside, but it is a very useful feature.
All right. Can you give a brief explanation how to use Google Drive Sync without filling up my laptop drive?
Well, you just go into it and you determine, and there you can choose whether it's going to be synced to your local computers or not. There's a devices manager right within Google Drive.
All right. You used the acronym CRM in the last few webinars. What does that represent?
Customer relationship management software, the software that we use to manage our community. In our case, we use a tool called Infusionsoft, but it's a database where all of your customers' names, and in our case, it's an email system that allows us to send out emails. And it's also got ours has an e-commerce engine. This is where we actually collect money for different projects and stuff like that, for products. So they're very they're fairly advanced databases designed to support basically your customers and allow you to communicate with them and know what they're doing.
All right. Which services is best for backup files 400 gigabytes and larger?
For large files, I don't know. There's a couple out there. Backblaze is one that's really well thought of, and there's a few. Who has done a pretty good review on that stuff is check out Brooks Duncan's content at docusnap.com. He's done some good stuff on backing up because he does a lot on the paperless office side. Large files have always been an issue. Transferring large files and that's always there's a lot of services out there that we've tried out and they work okay. But I, again, don't have one that I said. There doesn't seem to be a clear winner in that space.
All right. Curious if you move the Dropbox folder, for example, into your Documents folder on a Mac, will it back up to the cloud as well and clear the disk space?
It'll back up, but it won't clear the disk space unless you go in and take it out.
Right. Which services have a good upload and download manager for big files? Which I think you already answered that. There's some things going in the chat too. We
actually use Dropbox for it, and there are some dedicated services for video files and stuff that are quite expensive. But I'd be interested to see what other people are using because we've dabbled with them, but we've never fallen in love with one of them.
Okay. How do you make a video like this? What do you use? So I think they're asking, Maz is asking your interface you're using.
Okay, so we've got a nice little, April will drop a link in. It's we've got a little mini course called How to Make Video in Less Time Than Writing a Blog. And it's how I make the type of video that you saw just a few moments ago where I was doing the demonstration. It's screencasting. And we actually teach a full course on screencasting, which is going to be coming up before the end of the year. We'll be doing another version of it's called Screencasting Made Easy. But I teach people how to create online video that is of a tutorial nature of the sort that we use here at Autotech.
All right.
Avram's the HIPAA consultant. Well, that's a good one to have in the community.
That is, yes.
Let me just read this. HIPAA compliance and risk assessment is highly complex. Yeah, I agreed. The burden is on the user, not just the service. This is not legal or formal advice. Please do not rely on my answer. I do not accept any responsibility for this. Right? So Avram said he's doing the shuffle back, saying it's your responsibility, but he's not going to guarantee it. Anything on it. Good stuff. Thank you, Avram.
All right. And I think that's actually, believe it or not, one more came. With respect to moving Dropbox folder to Documents, I was talking about iCloud. Oh, just a clarification to the question earlier from Rob, which yeah. So I think we're actually at the end.
Good, and we're even a few minutes late on time. This is great. I hope that people found today's webinar valuable. It's interesting. This is one of the topics that you can get into so much complexity on, and I was a little anxious about it because they're just areas and so many different tools that people were using. But I think that we stayed on topic and we stayed on focus. That we brought some value to the table. So I appreciate that. Join us next week. We're going to be talking about we're going to be into content marketing, talking a lot about that. So any of you that are interested in kind of the online business side of the game, we will be covering that next week at a special time. We're going to be an hour late. Actually, over the next couple of months, there's going to be a few times when I'm on the roads. November gets pretty busy for me speaking wise, and Wednesdays I seem to be on the road. So we're going to be moving a few of these webinar Wednesdays to Tuesdays, and we're even going to have one on a Saturday. So we're going to move them around a little bit. Oh man, just a whole whack of stuff. It was thank yous. Good. I was worried there was a whole ton of questions coming in, but it does not appear to be thus. Hey, get on with your week, folks. It's been great to visit with you today. We have had a great time. To all of you new patrons, welcome aboard. We look forward to you joining in the community. Actually, I should have a check here because just in case there is anybody, and I didn't have my email open, so I haven't seen, but I'm sure that. I'm not sure there must be somebody, but quite often there is. Oh, no, that's okay. Now I'm sad. No new patrons. Maybe next week. But all our existing patrons, thank you so much for your support. Folks, I hope you found this valuable. Share it with your friends. Let your friends know about Webinar Wednesday if you indeed find it valuable. Join us tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be doing a Facebook Live tomorrow morning. I will see you all.